Hello again. Historian A.J.P. Taylor remarked that until 1905, anybody in the world from any country at all could simply enter Britain and live there for the rest of his life without notifying anybody or asking anyone's permission. This was in sharp contrast to the situation in most European countries in the 19th and early 20th century, which required foreigners staying for any length of time to register with the police and seek permission to remain in the country. Britain was a beacon of freedom in comparison. Perhaps it was for this reason that in the final decade or two of Queen Victoria's reign, an estimated 150,000 people, most of them Jews, came to Britain from Eastern Europe. As with any large and unregulated influx of immigrants to this country, the movement of population brought with it certain problems. In the late 19th century, political violence from anarchists, among others, was plaguing Europe and the United States. Apart from terrorist bombings in Paris, Barcelona, and other European cities, including London, there were also explosions in the United States. For instance, the Haymarket bombing in Chicago in 1886, which killed 7 police officers and a number of civilians. Then, too, there were assassinations. American President William McKinley was shot dead in 1901. The French president had already been assassinated in 1894, and in 1898, Empress Elizabeth of Austria was also assassinated. A bomb exploded near London's Greenwich Observatory in 1894, and several post offices were blown up in South London. In 1897 came the first death from a terrorist attack on the London Underground when a bomb exploded in a tube train at Aldersgate Street Station, now known as Barbican, killing a man from Tottenham. The British began to feel that the fewer political refugees they allowed into their country, the better. Just as these days it is, London was becoming world famous then as a place where extremists could hang out and plan terrorist attacks throughout the world. We remember the expression Londonistan, which hints that London is a centre for Islamist terrorists to shelter in. It had exactly the same reputation in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was other countries in Europe complained that whenever they wanted to catch somebody, whenever they had a political terrorist that they were on the track of, the person would always vanish and turn up in London. There were complaints at the turn of the century, too, in Britain that many of those entering the country from Eastern Europe expected to be supported by the state and didn't wish to work. In 1902, this led to the MP for Stepney, Major William Evans Gordon, complaining that at some schools in his area, hardly any of the children spoke English. He also said there was a housing crisis due to immigration. All these things, the fear of London being used as a safe haven for foreign terrorists, worries about people who were unable to support themselves financially, and also about a supposed wave of violence caused by immigrants, led to the passing in 1905 of the Aliens Act, which was the first piece of legislation in British history which sought to limit or restrict the numbers of people coming to live in Britain. In the description to this video, I give a link to the text, and at first sight it sounds very sensible and something we could well do with today. For example, it creates the category of undesirable immigrant and says that this applies to people who are unable to show that they have the means of supporting themselves if they're allowed into the country. Quite right too. We could do with some law like that these days. Lunatics, idiots, and those who are so disabled that they might be a burden on the local authority are also classed as undesirable immigrants and can be the subject of an expulsion order. At first sight, it all looked very tough. But then we have the fatal exemptions, because these strict rules are not to be applied to anybody who can show that he is seeking admission to Britain to avoid prosecution or punishment on religious or political grounds, or persecution, or the threat of imprisonment on religious or political grounds. Such a person cannot be refused admission to the country simply because he is destitute or likely to become a burden on a local authority. I wonder if any of this is ringing any bells, viewers. In fact, the 1905 Aliens Act, like every other immigration act ever passed in Britain, starts off by sounding ferocious and uncompromising, but then hidden away in the fine print is that fatal little paragraph about asylum seekers. And this was quite predictably exploited by those who took us in this country for mugs at that time. The 1905 Aliens Act did not slow down the flow of immigrants to Britain because, of course, anybody who was in danger of being turned back at the border claimed that they were being persecuted in their own country for their political or religious beliefs. This is a racket which has been around now for almost 120 years.